Alright, worksheet number 4, the building blocks of life. From the smallest single-celled organism to the tallest tree, all life depends on the proteins and reaction of 4 classes of organic carbon-based compounds. They are carbohydrates, and then we have lipids, followed by proteins and nucleic acids. Okay, these organic molecules are the building blocks of all living things. Building blocks of all living things, and are responsible for most of the structure and function of the body, including energy, storage, insulation, growth, repair, communication, and transfer of hereditary information. Let me just to make this clearer. Okay. Simple organic molecules can be joined together to form all essential biological molecules needed for life. So now the next bit that we're going to do is to draw the following macromolecule, starting with carbohydrates. So sometime next week, or maybe after that, we will build these models. So it's very important that you understand what elements go into building the models. So starting with carbohydrates, again as a review, carbohydrates are composed of monosaccharides, or they're very simple sugar. And it would be carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So we're going to start with the carbon here. It's going to be attached to an oxygen, followed by another carbon, also carbon on the other side. So it's going to form a hexagonal shape. Another carbon here, and then we're going to attach both carbons. So that's the basic shape. And then this carbon right here is connected to another carbon. This carbon is connected to an oxygen and a hydrogen. This carbon on the side, it is connected to a hydrogen and another OH molecule. This carbon at the bottom will do the same thing. Oxygen and then H. This one is connected to an H. This carbon right here is connected to another OH, followed by another H. And then the last bit we're going to add will be for these 2 carbon. This one is also connected to another OH. This one is connected to an H. So this is what a simple sugar would look like, one of them. And this happens to be glucose. Glucose has the formula C6H12O6, meaning we have 6 carbons, 12 hydrogen, and then 6 oxygen. So if you go through and actually count those, these are going to be the numbers. Chemists don't usually write the structure like this. It's in a simplified form, which would look like this. So instead of always writing the carbon, it is understood that any time, so let me just redraw this. Okay, so I'm on this bit, there's oxygen. Okay, so anytime there is a connecting point where carbon should be, it's just going to be a line. For a chemist or somebody who had taken organic chemistry, they will understand that where the 2 lines meet, such as in this spot right here is a carbon. So let's redraw the rest. Okay, it goes down right here, carbon, carbon, another carbon. This one is connected to a carbon as well. There you have it. So it's taking more of a hexagonal shape. So at these corners right here, or at these points, are carbon atoms. Okay, also one thing that chemists do is that they just put OH together. So let's start with this carbon at the top. Okay, there's a carbon right here, and that carbon is connected to an OH. So again, this corner right here, or this point, it's understood that there's going to be a carbon there. We don't have to write it every single time. And then we have this carbon is connected to an OH. This carbon is also connected to an OH. This carbon is connected to an OH at the top. This carbon is also connected to an OH. Okay, notice how when it comes to carbon, we don't have to add all the H's. Okay, so again, when it comes to carbon, we don't have to add all the H's. For a chemist or somebody who had taken organic chemistry, when it comes to carbon, it is understood that if it's not written there, it's going to be a hydrogen. So later on when you take chemistry, you will understand that carbon usually has 4 connections. It makes 4 connections. So this is 1, 2, 3. The other one is understood to be a connection to hydrogen, which we don't have to write in. So again, for a chemist or somebody who had taken organic chemistry, they will understand that even though we did not write the hydrogens, it is there. Alright, so that is carbohydrates. If we string monosaccharides together, we create carbohydrates. Our example here is glucose. Okay, we move on to lipids. Lipids will have this structure. It has a carbon backbone. So we have carbon, carbon, carbon. This carbon will be connected to an OH, OH, OH. And then the rest will be hydrogen. So this is the backbone of a lipid. As you notice, it's all going to be carbon, and this is known as carbon chain backbone. Okay, and this can actually go on. So this can keep going to a lot more carbon chain backbone, but this is the basic structure of a lipid. This happens to be glycerol. So let's write that down. So this happens to be glycerol, and it's connected to a hydrogen like that. In the questions at the bottom, it will ask about the difference between saturated and unsaturated fat. So let's draw those. We have here R, and this R is a combination of different atoms and molecules, which we don't have to draw, but we're just going to replace it with R. And then we have our carbon chain backbone. So it's going to go carbon, 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 carbon. Okay, we're going to end up with an H, and then it's understood that each of these carbons will have 2 H's on each side, which I'm not going to draw, but hopefully you realize or you remember that here we have our carbons, and that on each side will be hydrogens. So this is the saturated fat. Okay, next we have the unsaturated fat, or also known as trans fat. It will look the same, so it will be combining carbon, carbon, carbon. However, at some point, carbon will double bond to another carbon. And then it creates a sort of a kink to the structure. So instead of it being straight, when you have that double bond, it kind of bends. Okay, then this is the new structure. So this is trans fat or unsaturated fat. One of the key differences would be this type of fat, saturated fat, is easier to break down compared to an unsaturated fat or trans fat. So in terms of food, it's not recommended to have a large intake of trans fat because it is not easy for our body to digest, so then it kind of just pulls together, versus saturated fat where it's easier to break down and then it's expelled by the body. Next we have protein. So protein has this structure, or general structure, and this particular protein is known as tyrosine. So first let's write that overall there are 20 amino acids. So amino acids, when you put them together, will create protein. And like I said in class, we're a big blob of different types of protein. We're only going to draw one of them. That protein is known as tyrosine. And if you drink energy drinks, and you read the ingredients, one of them might say that it contains tyrosine and that it is very useful, it has all these health benefits. And tyrosine has this structure. So again, we're back to the hexagonal shape. And hopefully I don't have to draw it here, but understand that at each point, okay, each corner is a carbon. And this carbon is double bonded here and here. So the two lines mean that it has double bond. This carbon at the end is connected to an OH. And then this carbon on the opposite end will be connected to another carbon. There's also carbon right here, and then we have two more. So altogether we have one more. So we have 1, 2, 3. This carbon is connected to an OH and double bonded to an oxygen. Lastly, this carbon right here is connected to a nitrogen, which is connected to a hydrogen and a hydrogen right here. Alright, so again, later on, you'll actually build this model. Understand that at each of these points are carbon atoms. Alright, and so this is what tyrosine looks like. We have 19 more different amino acids, which we're not going to draw. But for this case, we drew tyrosine. Next one, the last one, we have nucleic acid, comprised of nucleotides. And nucleotides will have this generic structure. So first we're going to start with the phosphate group. We have P double bonded to oxygen. And we have OH here, OH on this side. This is connected to a carbon, or connected to an oxygen. This oxygen is connected to a carbon. This carbon will connect to this structure. You have O. Okay, so here we have a pentagonal shape. The carbons at the bottom are connected to OHs. And then this last carbon is connected to another complex structure. So if you need to pause this video, go ahead and do so. But we have a nitrogen on that side. Okay, so another pentagonal shape. We have double bonds here. And then the last bit would be a hexagonal shape. So we have this nitrogen, also nitrogen at the bottom, and then lastly this double bond, and then the last bit, this carbon at the top, is connected to NH2. Alright, so this chapter, after all, is titled Chemistry and Biology. So there's a lot of these chemical structures involved in biological processes and function. So this again happened to be a nucleotide. Again, nucleotides create nucleic acids, and nucleic acids form DNA and RNA. So this bit right here is known as the phosphate group. This is the sugar bit. And then this area right here is the nitrogen base. And that is nucleic acids. So after this bit, on page 3 should be questions that you will be able to answer if you followed along with the rest of the video. Okay, so use pages 1 and 2 to answer page 3.